invite you to the second day of Culturescapes 2025 Sahara Festival. My name is Kateryna Botanova. I used to be a co-curator and now I'm a curatorial advisor to the festival and a person a little bit behind this conference. So I wanted to do a teeny tiny introduction that you understand why is it happening and what do we want to talk today about. But first and foremost, this is just the second day of a festival. I want to thank people without whom neither this day nor the fantastic opening yesterday would not be possible, and that's the team of the Culturescapes Festival. Thank you so much. We just started, but you still, and we all still have 7 weeks to go. Please, a round of applause for great people who worked really hard. Those of you who joined us yesterday for the opening and who were listening to the speeches or even given the speeches yesterday, we were talking about celebration of culture and an important role that arts and culture play in different societies. Today, actually, I want us to think, to talk, to discuss when and how this celebration is possible, and also when and how it's not really possible. The topic of this conference, the idea of this conference, Decolonize Festivals, actually comes from, what is it now, 6 years ago, when Culturescapes Festival first time switched from the focus on the cultural landscapes of countries to the cultural landscapes of bigger regions, and we were working with Amazonia. And working with South America, we also worked with thinkers and artists that work with the notion of decolonization, because the notion of decoloniality, as you might know, comes from South American thinking. The idea of decoloniality, which is not so much or only a physical or political act of becoming an independent society, independent state, not a colony anymore, but a cognitive act of thinking how our knowledge is being built. What stands behind our knowledges, how the languages in which we talk about ourselves as societies, as cultures, where they come from. So this idea of looking at the sources of knowledge, also knowledge as power, was behind basically all the editions since 2021, Amazonia, and then Sahara 23 and today. And this idea of looking at the sources of knowledge and what we know about the regions that we want to talk about, the regions we want to present, on the stages in Basel and all around Switzerland, brought us to the kind of honest understanding of the limits of knowledge that the two white European curators with a very different also cultural background, but still have, for example, about Sahara. That brought us to the idea that we need and we want to broaden that knowledge and create an artistic advisory board. An artistic advisory board is a body of fantastic, profound artists and cultural actors and cultural thinkers from the region, but also kind of in Europe, but connected to the region, was this environment, where the idea of this conference, of the discussion, putting this question on stage first came to. And I'm very happy that members of the former Artistic Advisory Board from 23 are here with us during this conference. And also here on stage today will be several members of Artistic Advisory Board from this festival, Sahara 2025. Our discussions within Artistic Advisory Board about the limitations of knowledge and knowledge as power were also in a way picked up and matched with another circle of fantastic professionals. It's an informal network of African and European festivals that started to get together at the end of last year, I believe, online, and trying to look together at what festivals are, what role festivals play in overall kind of cultural landscape of our societies, in different African countries, but also in different European countries, how different those landscapes are, how different the understanding of the festival actually should be, and do we ever question the notion that the festival, artistic festival as we see it, often comes from the model of Western European festival. We were talking with colleagues about very different contexts and also different needs that exists for festivals in, African continent and in Europe. We're talking about the differences of power, differences of resources, limitations and difference of possibilities, and also about mobility. Because if we think about it, here, at least in this part of Europe, artistic mobility and the audience mobility is not an issue. But we step a little bit outside of, let's say, European Union, especially we go to the African continent, and it becomes a rather big issue. How do festivals operate when mobility and communication is an issue? Another thing we were talking about was who do we work for? Because again, when we, for example, in Culturescapes, work with artists from the regions that we work with, and we bring their work here to Switzerland and to also other European neighboring countries, we often deal with the question, are those artistic production understandable? Are they translatable for European audiences? What do they talk about? And talking with the colleagues from outside of Europe, we were talking about the fact that actually what artists do should be first understandable and necessary and connecting to the audiences there where they work, where they live, their own audiences. So the question of the audience relevance and how do we deal with this difference, is a festival also a translation tool, was also on the table and discussed a lot. But probably the most important question that we talked with both group, with Artistic Advisory Board, but also with the Festival Network, was about the power and meaning of art. Because while in Western Europe, art and culture is often seen and celebrated as a self-expression or entertainment, a certain degree of freedom, in the societies where peace might not be there and security might be not there, art becomes something completely different. And a lot of our colleagues were talking that sometimes art becomes one of the last means to speak publicly, to say truth to power, to empower societies. And this differences in understanding and the role of art is also very important, maybe even crucial, to bring into the discussion when we talk about different cultural contexts between Europe and Africa, but also other parts of the world. It's probably funny enough that we have this conference and we opened this conference on the day when the Nobel Peace Prize was awarded, and thanks God it was not awarded to the one person who really, really wanted it. But even the fact that this was on the table really brings us to the point that, yeah, whether we like it or not, but autocratic tendencies are becoming stronger and stronger, and I think it's not too much to speak of both political but also symbolic neocoloniality coming to us and that we have to deal with this. But even here, also it's very important to remember that the way it works in Europe, it works for us here, and the way it works in other parts of the world, including Africa, is very, very different. So what I want to do today is put a few questions here in the space, and then our wonderful moderators and panelists will pick them up, discuss, and also bring back to you, for wider discussion. So please be prepared to join and talk about how do we address the harmful impact of global power imbalances in the festival ecosystems, how the politics behind festival programming in various countries being formed and implemented, how do we hear a broader range of voices and experiences without marginalizing or exoticizing them, and finally, what is the role of a festival or festivals in this highly turbulent times. Without further ado, I want to give the word to a member of Artistic Advisory Board of Culturescapes, wonderful professional, independent curator and cultural policy specialist from Senegal, the person who held professorial positions and teaching in various African universities, and the person who was the General Commissioner of the Africa 2020 season, a series of more than 1,500 cultural, scientific, and pedagogical events in France from December of 2020 to September of 2021, which she will talk in detail now in the keynote. Ngonefal.
Good afternoon. Thank you. Does it work? Yeah. I have a large voice in case it doesn't work. So thank you for being here. So it's a pleasure. And I'm going to use the Africa 2020 season that Kateryna mentioned as a case study, talking from a personal perspective on when people are talking about decolonial. I have to say, I'm not sure what it means. And sometimes people who say it, I'm not sure they even know what they're talking about. But that's a provocation for the discussions later. So for me, what was important is I was teaching in Cape Town, and then I received an email saying, the French president has the idea, he wants to celebrate African cultures, and we would like to have your opinion. So I thought it was a spam from some Nigerians, so I didn't pay attention. And when the email came back, said, Madame Fall, did you see our email? My dear friend, Professor Jay Potter said, why don't you Google the name? Maybe these people are true. Maybe France really wants your advice. So it was true. And I met them and lectured them for about 2 hours, saying, don't do this. Celebrating African cultures, we're no longer in the 80s. It doesn't make sense. And I was already thinking all the network of French institutes in Africa were going to ship to France black and brown people who would be jumping on stage with boubou and djellaba and singing. And I will have to take it as a personal offense as an African myself. And so they say, it's too late, it was announced, but we heard what you say, we shouldn't go that way. How will we go about it? And I say, if the agenda behind is for the French to better understand Africans, going beyond their colonies, because French, they strongly believe they know Africa until today. So it's not even a discussion. I had crazy discussions with French members of the government, of the parliament, or of organizations, explaining to me what Africa is about and what Africa needs. I know you're laughing, but that was 2018. So it means the situation is quite serious. And when I was smiling at them, saying, you can't even spell my name. Do you know who you're talking to? You're trying to explain me who I am. They took it as an offense, saying that I was arrogant. And the more I was insisted, then I became the racist person. Anyway, so I'm going to go through the project, how I designed, because after that conversation, they had a debrief with their boss, which is the president. And the president at that time, and even today, if you're following French politics, he likes to be provocative. So he said, this looks like a radical thinker. She should then do it. If she says the way we were going to go about it, it's not good, that Africans should be in charge, then she should be in charge. So that's how I took time to think about it, and then decided to design what was going to be the biggest project I've ever done in my life. But I call it a people's journey because it's about a continent, not a country. Bear in mind that it's a continent of about 1,300,000,000 people on the land that is over 30,000 square kilometers. How big is Switzerland? Just to give you a scale. So even myself, having been all around the continent since the 90s, how much do I know about this continent when I say I'm an African? So for me, what was clear was to involve artists, museum directors, art professionals, directors of festivals, professors of universities, scientists, into let's design it together and let's decide together what do we have to say about the world today, and that will imply saying what we think and say about ourselves as a people, as Africans. So these were the dates. It was a 10-month, year-long programming. And I gave it a subtitle to make it clear to the French that the season was an invitation to look at and understand the world from an African perspective. And understand is important from an African perspective is more important, because many French organizations were very excited. So, oh, that's great. I also want to be part of it. I want to do an African project. So I had to say, an African project doesn't have any meaning. You don't wake up every day in your institution saying, I'm going to do a French project, a European project, an Asian project. That doesn't make sense. What is at stake here is to listen and learn from Africans what they have to say about the world of today. So you think that's easy to understand? I thought it was easy to understand. But for many people in France, 99%, they didn't want to understand. They failed to understand. Or they resisted to understand because they didn't want Africans to be in charge. But they will not admit that they didn't want Africans to be in charge. So then you are thinking back of, when you look at the African diaspora, which I'm not part of, but then I had many discussions with them, then you're wondering, okay, because from Africa, when we listen to them, we say, you were born, you grew up in wealthy countries. You don't know what electricity cut means. You don't know what a military coup means. You don't know what money laundering means. You have hot water. You have it all. You can go to school. What are you complaining about? Just because you're black and brown, give us a break. But then being in their own context, I had to apologize and say, now I understand what you're talking about. And it's for sure, the challenges we have on the continent are completely different from the challenges you're facing here. On the continent, if you take out South Africa and some communities in North Africa, racism is not an issue. In my country, I'm the majority, and I've always been. So suddenly spending 4 years in France, and then you're black, and then you're a woman, I've never thought of myself in those terms, but then you seriously have to take that into consideration when you're having discussions with white directors of institutions who are angry that their president selected a black woman for Africa to have that much power. Because that's what it's about, it's just a power game. So these are just points to keep in mind. And for me, what was important, it was, I am tired of having people thinking, talking, deciding on my behalf or on behalf of Africans. So now for once, for this project, people will think, will act, will decide in their own terms. So we are deciding what we want to talk about, and France is the stage, is just the host country. So French, whether you are an organization or you are part of the audience, just sit down and learn. But how can you accept to learn from people you colonized? You brought them the Enlightenments, you brought them civilization, you brought them roads, schools, religion, everything, because they were savages. And now suddenly, centuries later, those savages are telling you, we are going to tell you what to do. And the more people were progressive, actually, the more they had handicaps, because they didn't realize that their reactions and what they were saying were the opposite to what they were claiming to be, progressive. So for me, it was also a very interesting exercise. What I did to make sure that on the scale of the continent, all the voices are heard, I organized a workshop in a small island at the border of the desert called Saint-Louis du Sénégal, and it was the first French city, dating 16th century. And I invited these 4 brains that I rented to sit down from different generations, from different countries and regions of the world, and also from different professional backgrounds. What we have in common, being born, growing up, and working on the continent. So what are the burning issues? Issues that are the object of scientific, artistic, academic research on the continent. And can we make a classification? And then these are the conversations we would like to have. What are our challenges? So it was 5 days locked in a classroom, intense, with no taboo. Sometimes we strongly disagreed, which was also interesting, but that's necessary. In a family, nobody always agrees. So imagine on the scale of the continent, and these 4 plus myself having the responsibility to decide on the scale of that continent what the conversations are going to be about. So we came with these 13 topics that then I put into 5 different categories and gave them kind of poetic titles in a way to spark imagination. And then people could decide, I want to do a project on citizenship, or I want to do a project on memory, on archives, on redistribution of resources, etc. So these, what was decided. What was interesting, talking about systems of disobedience. Down the road, what happened in France, the Yellow Jacket movement. So some people who were saying, because some were excited, saying, oh, this really, really resonates with my environment or my context in the north of France. Other was like, this is too intellectual. And then it also gave me a lot to think about how museum curators in France curate exhibitions. If this is too intellectual, then how do they work? Understanding this concept is too difficult, then what is easy for them? But the Yellow Jacket movement was another proof that what is important in our context also resonates in other parts of the world. And for the Yellow Jacket movement, it was quite clear. So just giving you the pitch, designed by African professionals, the season was based on these 13 major issues, subject of intellectual, artistic, and scientific research in Africa. A season designed as a laboratory for the production and dissemination of knowledge. The season as a sounding board of agents of change, the foundation of a collective idea of political, social, economic, and cultural emancipation carried by people facing the same challenges on the African soil. And for me, that was very important. This is my personal definition of Pan-Africanism, just to make it short. So what I also wanted, I wanted it to be Pan-African. So people who were submitting projects were not allowed to do a country-based project. Like, I'm here to promote my country, I'm here to promote my language, I'm here to promote my ethnic group. So whatever you're doing, you have to involve people from different countries, from the continent. And I want it to be multidisciplinary because that's my approach to curating. So you can't just do an exhibition. So having scientists collaborating with sociologists, collaborating with filmmakers, collaborating with curators, that's what I wanted. And for me, what was important, paying tribute to women, that's what I've been doing since the 90s, and targeting the youth, because I believe that young people are less contaminated by cliches than we are as adults. So I did put up a selection committee to, when people submit, I'm not the one who is deciding. So there was a selection committee of these 11 professionals, some from the continent and some also from the diaspora. It was also important to have that viewpoint and that context base from the diaspora. So there was diaspora from Germany and diaspora from France, and then Africans from the continent, and each came with their expertise. And they selected the project, so the 1,500 plus project. When we started when I announced the selection committee meeting, the ministries of education, foreign affairs, culture sent a representative. I say, fine, but I remind you, you can listen, you can be involved, but just like me, your voice doesn't count. There's a selection committee, these are professionals, so you can join. It took 1 hour from the representative to the Ministry of Education to burst into tears after a nasty comment by Yvonne, the Kenyan scientist. And then at the coffee break, the others left, and we never saw them again. So I had 3 pillars. The women focus was important for me, making sure that women are visible. Of course, they are in project, but then creating a specific sub-program where women professionals will do projects only inviting women, not to talk about womanhood or how difficult it is in the world to be a woman, but addressing those issues, whether it's history, memory, citizenship, or redistribution of resources whatsoever. The headquarters, it was in each region of France, to have a very big project. And so to find a kind of Kunsthalle who will accept for several months to become like one of the flagship, like a temporary cultural center where you will have an exhibition, you will have workshops, you will have film screening, you will have talks, you will have performances, etc. Just like a mini cultural center to make sure that each region has something about this season, because that was my mandate, to have a project France mainland, but also in the overseas territories, because of the history of France with the French Caribbean and in the Indian Ocean. And so I had a map of France in my office, and I was putting some pins saying, okay, we have a project here. And then one day, the director of Institut Français Paris, because they were in charge of the admin, she came into my office and she said, what is this map about? And I said, well, this is how we're going to colonize France. Bear in mind that this year is the 140th anniversary of the Berlin Conference. So that was also interesting. So I'm just going to show you now some images very quickly of these different projects of different types involving. Sometimes I received spontaneous proposals from people. In other cases, I reach out to some people, say, what do you want to do? You have to be involved. I want you to be involved. What do you have to do? So it was going both ways. How do you communicate? But also using my network and the network of my networks to make sure that almost everybody on the continent has the information and can submit a proposal. So these were just like part of the women-focused exhibitions. The talks, music. Music, you can see we had different types of music. More traditional, and then DJ, and they are all from Nordic countries. The headquarters that we had in these different cities, and also we had one in Martinique. The one in Guadeloupe got canceled because of COVID. Champagne, yes, the one in the east of France, because they are in the region of Champagne. They decided with the producers there to brand the champagne, because it was just after the harvesting, and to make Africa 2020 champagne. So that was cool, I think, and it was very good. So some workshops, talks, also targeting the youth. So one organization did only a program for children, which was also very interesting. Education, it was, as I said, important to have that. So what I did is reach out and have a partnership with the Ministry of Education, Youth and Sport, UNESCO via the general history of UNESCO, and then France Volontaire for the civic servants. So this is what we did more or less with them. We did publications for schools. We did also a national training program with the general history of Africa. So we trained about 150 school teachers who volunteer. People were saying, it's worthless, it's not going to happen. And then when we sent the announcement, they were saying, you need to have 50 to be able to do a national training plan. 600 people applied. And we could only accommodate 150, and then all the others were frustrated. So I told the Ministry of Culture, this can be an ongoing program, and you can do it every year with UNESCO and the Department of General History of Africa. And of course, the moment I left, when the project ended, they buried that idea. Because then what's behind is that Africa is giving knowledge to France. France has been giving knowledge to Africa. It cannot be the other way. So just another indication of what the mentality you're dealing with is about, even if people don't admit it. So these were the volunteers that we had, and for me it was important always to have North Africa, that we don't forget North Africa. And I had to tell people, when they were saying, oh, is North Africa going to be involved? I say, well, the answer is in your question, North Africa. So they are involved. And also to have people who are from former Portuguese and English colonies. So to find institutions in France where the staff, some members speak Portuguese or speak English. so that these young people could be involved. And so for me also that we don't lose up having only entertainment. We called it the September Summit as a kind of wink to the UN Assembly, always happening in September, where our leaders talk a lot, but nothing comes out of it. So as a provocation, we called it the September Summit, and that was kind of discussions, like two people, or maybe a group, from different professional backgrounds, discussing one of the subjects. For example, if you take memory, what does it mean if you have a neuroscientist with an historian and then with a writer talking about memory altogether? So this is what we did. The scientific projects, we had many science and tech. Culinary art, very important. So that was a kind of touring project. It did like about 30 cities across France, and we also partnered with schools, so they changed the menu of the school, and that was also the opportunity beyond food to talk about how food travels and how it changes your culture, even if you're not aware of it. Like take pasta, for example. Don't tell the Italians it comes from China. They're going to be angry, but that's a fact. Chocolate, tomato, etc., etc., etc. And then talk about the environment, climate change, etc. And then we had all the other artistic disciplines as well. What was important for me with this was to invite Sudanese photographers who were at the forefront of the first revolution. And so they were the protagonists, but they also documented that revolution, and I knew about it. So I reached out to two of them that I knew and asked them to think of a project around citizenship and systems of disobedience, taking their own experience as a case, and come to AL, which is the biggest photography festival in Europe, and be invited to have an exhibition, but more importantly, to have a roundtable about their commitment. And so that's, for me, that is was the most symbolic gesture, and make sure they all come, they all get their visa. People were overwhelmed at the end of their speech. And today is dramatic knowing what happened after that in Sudan. And when it happened, many reached out to me asking for help because they were trying to get out of the country. I was no longer working in France, but contacting my network at the cabinet of the French president. And they were all saying, we're busy taking out our citizens and European citizens. We cannot take out Sudanese. I said, okay, so they are on their own. And they say, yes. I said, well, okay, that's sense of solidarity is good to know. All of them managed to get out, but in harsh conditions. Two have been arrested and disappeared for about a month. I don't know what kind of PTSD they are going through because they are not talking about it. And every time I WhatsApp them, they say, don't worry, Ngone, I'm fine. Okay, but so this was the closing date where the French president decided to do his own thing at the Élysée Palace. I don't know why and I received notification like 3 weeks before. Like, oh, because I already had a plan for the closing, even if it was COVID. You have to remember it was COVID. But I had a plan so I had to cancel my plan because the client said, no, it was my idea. You hacked my idea, imposed your ideas, did whatever you want. So now, for the closing, it's my turn to shine. Okay. And she said, and I want an exhibition. Well, it's a heritage building, so you can't really put art in there. So, but then I thought of Emeka Ogbo, who is a Nigerian artist based in Berlin for many years, who is a sound installation artist. That I met him when he was just finishing school in Lagos a long time ago, and I did work with him on 2 different projects in Madrid and Denmark. So I said, would you accept? Please don't say no, because I don't have a plan B. And he said, okay, okay, okay. And so we decided. And so one of his projects is, so this Danfo, a very iconic minibus in Lagos, where he put music. And so we were lucky that the Danfo, his gallery is Paris-based, and the Danfo was stored in Paris. So we brought it here. And so you have so when you enter the site of Élysée, you have, because there were speakers all around, even on the rooftop. So when you enter Élysée, you have the feeling, if you know Lagos, that you are in a market in Lagos, which was kind of strange. And so Emeka came and welcomed the French president, saying, welcome to Lagos, we've colonized the place. Welcome to Élysée, we've colonized the place. President nicely said, well, just for a few hours. And then Emeka said, that's what you think, man. Anyway, so that was interesting. But what I would say as a conclusion, it was 40 months. Because of COVID, then everything was delayed. And sharing the journey with the pandemic, because when the pandemic started, we were launching the press conference. It was 2 months before the official opening of the festival. So suddenly you have to move the entire programming and find new dates. The dance biennial in Lyon did a tote bag saying, we are resisting, because that's what I was saying. People were calling me anxious. We don't know what to do. I say, okay, remember, an invitation to look at the world from an African perspective. Now it's time to think like an African. We've seen it all. We had slavery, colonization, military coups, natural disaster. We've had it all. And we're still standing here with our dignity, and we still have sense of humor. Behave like an African and stop complaining. So this is just the statistics, because then it gives you a scale of the project. The African organizations from all over the continent involved. The French organizations, who were all complaining when COVID arrived. 210 cities, that's where the project happened, in different 210 cities, including in Martinique, Guadeloupe, Guyana, Réunion. The African volunteers, and then, yes, the Women Focus, headquarter, the pedagogical project, an average of about 40 million people, online and in person, because some projects were online before the people can fly and travel again. So, and this was the poster, which nobody in any ministry or even at Élysée, they hated this poster. And this poster, I'm going to end with this, by the last 2 minutes, very disciplined. I invited a Senegalese portrait photographer who is well known. His name is Omar Victor Diop. And ask him, because how do you make a visual that can embrace these 13 issues that I mentioned, addressing such a big continent? The safe way will say, oh, just put the title and then move on. So I asked him, and he came up with this idea. So he did his casting, he did the shooting. And so then I sent the file to Élysée with the ministries involved. And the answer I got from one of Macron's advisors was, Dear Ngone, thank you for the poster. Unfortunately, it doesn't reflect the idea we have of the season. We find the protagonist quite arrogant, and it's a no-go. I just called then her colleague, who is like the #1 advisor for Africa. So I called Frank and I said, listen, I saw the email. I think it's better if I speak to you than answering, because when you all say that this does not reflect what you think the festival should be about, then why did you ask me to design it? If it's about, and I say, if it's about a Caucasian gaze and not an African gaze, because this is an African photographer. So Omar now, he went to Japan for a residency. I can call him back. You sort it out. You give him a brief. He might refuse, because he also has an ego. But if he accepts, then you tell him what to do. If he refuses, you can ask the photographer of Élysée, you brief her, and then you tell her what to do. But that is going to delay, because we already have a slot for putting the posters all over the country. And we've already paid for that. And the printer, whatever. So if you change, everything is getting delayed. And it's going to cost more money. If you have the money, and if you are ready for that delay, like the season is going to start, and then the posters will be in France like 3 months later, that's fine. Never heard back from him after that phone conversation. So I just called the printer and said, print. Voila. Thank you.
I think we still have maybe 5 minutes for questions or comments, if somebody wants to jump in.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you very much for this insightful, enlightening tour. Also replunging us back into the COVID confinement. Yeah. You started with taking exception with the term decoloniality, decolonialidad. And I'm just curious, it's just en passant, what is your take on it? You say that you don't understand it or you don't agree with it. Yeah, it's just a clarification that I'm curious about.
On decoloniality, yes, because being a Senegalese from Senegal, so operating in that context where I'm the majority. And as you know, Senegal is a former French colony, and Dakar, where I'm from, was the capital of the French colonies in West Africa. So it had a special status. Actually, Dakar was not a colony, it was a French city within a colony. It's complicated, but Wikipedia can give you more information on that. So what happened after independence, 16 years after, that's when the curriculum changed in Senegal. So we went from a French curriculum and slowly having a Senegalese curriculum. And that's when I started primary school in the early 70s. So I followed the transformation of Senegalization of the curriculum in Senegal. So then when South Africa, who was actually at the origin of these, changed the curriculum, Road Must Fall. It started at the Cape Town University, then to Joburg. They also had their reasons. They wanted to decolonize the curriculum. And it was needed, and it was not done. Then when you expand that to other regions of the world, then that's when I think it became like a Hawaiian pizza. Like everything is decolonial, everything is knowing that the contexts are not the same, histories are not the same, and challenges are not the same. I understand that if you are a young person, your parents come from Africa, you can have sometimes confusions about your own identity. That I agree, which we don't have. We used to be very condescending with the diaspora, saying, oh, these people with their identity crisis, which is some mean. So, but how do you talk to let's take the case of France, saying, can we actually know a little bit about other parts of the world? Why is France resisting to that? Well, the good example, when I came with this partnership with UNESCO about the general history of Africa, saying the way you are teaching history and geography very superficially, it's outrageous when I had a look at it. So why don't you use these tools that Africa Union had given mandate to UNESCO to change the curriculum? And so these tools are like Bibles for all the member states. Why don't you want to use that? And it proved that after the project, they refused to do a long-term partnership with UNESCO and all these trainings. So, but France doesn't want, but then is ignoring part of his population. And then on the other side, the right wing is saying, we are the majority. So we don't care about your issues as a minority. You are a minority, so just shut up. And then everything in the States, it was about wokeism, and then it crossed the Atlantic, and you have this fight. And it got to a point, because I've attended some discussions around, we have to decolonize this, we have to decolonize that, we have to decolonize everything. What I think, and I'm being provocative on purpose, is that talking too much about decolonizing, actually you're not decolonized. I think complaining that things should be decolonized, it's a waste of time. You know what you should do? The strategy I use, you're hired to do something and you hack it. But the entire methodology, thinking of process, is decolonial because I'm not from a former colony. So I haven't been brainwashed by all these, let's say, colonial ideology. I just do it the way I think it should be done. But I was in that position because I was hired by the French president. Of course, people were angry, and I was saying, but why don't you ask the president to fire me? If you are so angry, stop the sabotage, stop being violent, stop the bullying, stop. It didn't stop, but we also didn't stop. It did what we had to do. But it's a privileged position. But even in your tiny environment, if you are, let's say, a school teacher, how do you plant a seed? Talking to your students or to the school kids. If you work for a festival, how do you also make people aware of some? But being just complaining and having round table discussions with just black and brown people saying, oh, this is a safe space. No, that's a therapy. But you're not finding solutions. It's a war. You have to be aware of it. And I'm serious. With no offense to anybody, it is a war. So you don't have to be as harsh as Trump, but you have to find strategies to knock things down.
Thank you so much, Ngonefal. We'll finish here, pause for a second with the provocation of how do we have a discussion where we do come maybe to certain solutions, even if they're not universal. Thank you so much.